When a star ascends, it doesn't ask permission, it just burns. Let that simmer. Because what you're witnessing right now isn't luck, karma, or coincidence, it's divine disruption in motion. And here's the plot twist they never saw coming. The very people who once laughed, doubted, and side-eyed your journey are now feeling the gravitational pull of your elevation, and it's warping their reality. See, neuroscientists say the human brain is wired to resist unfamiliar patterns, especially in people they once labeled predictable. So when you broke their mental mold, leveled up, and exited their orbit, their neurons short-circuited. Their egos filed for bankruptcy, and now they're walking around like, wait, when did you become all this? It's not just that you're on the next level, it's that you skipped a few steps and now you're unrecognizable to the people who never grew. So buckle in, because in this video, we're not just talking about glow-ups or haters. We're unpacking the full psychological and spiritual impact of your breakthrough. And trust me, they feel it. In their pride, in their silence, in the echo of the version of you they can no longer reach. And hey, if they're watching from the sidelines right now, eyes wide, jaw tight, it's not shade. It's just the cost of misjudging the chosen one. Welcome to the aftermath. Number one, they witnessed your struggle but never expected the ascent. They saw your struggle in real time, not just heard about it, witnessed it. They watched you stumble, get rejected, get overlooked, lose things, lose people, even lose yourself for a while. They watched, but they didn't help. They didn't reach out. Some stayed silent. Others took notes. And a few even whispered behind closed doors, predicting how badly it would all end for you. To them, your downfall was entertainment, your pain was a punchline, and your dreams a delusion they rolled their eyes at. But what they didn't see coming was this: you weren't breaking down, you were breaking open. You were becoming something else, something rare, something that doesn't come with applause in the beginning, because people don't clap for things they don't understand. And now, the tables have flipped. The same people who couldn't be bothered to acknowledge you during the process are suddenly stunned by the product. They didn't expect you to pull it off. They never imagined you'd rise from that low place and become someone they could no longer define, control, or diminish. And now it's awkward. They're stuck between pretending they didn't see your glow up and privately obsessing over how it happened. You see it in how they lurk. You feel it in how they go quiet when your name comes up. They're uncomfortable because they bet against you and lost. Not just once, over and over again. Every new level you reach is another reminder that they read your story all wrong, and there's no polite way to admit they never believed in you. Now the silence is heavy. Their words have dried up. And the worst part, they can't even hate properly, because deep down, they know your rise was earned, not gifted, not luck, not overnight. It was the result of everything they overlooked. You didn't just pull it off, you made them question why they ever doubted you to begin with. And that's a feeling that's hard to shake. Number two, they didn't lose access to you. They lost access to the version of you that tolerated them. They didn't lose you. They lost the version of you who kept shrinking to make everyone else feel comfortable. The version of you who gave endless chances, who explained yourself repeatedly, who tolerated disrespect and called it love, patience, or loyalty. That version, gone. And that's what they're grieving, even if they won't admit it out loud. What they're really missing is access, not to your current self, but to the old you. The one who stayed on the phone too long, who said yes when you wanted to say no, who swallowed hurt just to keep the peace. The one who dimmed your light around them because shining too bright made their shadows feel too loud. They weren't prepared for the shift when you started moving different, not from ego, but from clarity. You saw through the cycles, you outgrew the guilt, and you stopped showing up to emotional spaces where your worth was constantly on trial. That's the part that's burning them now. They can't reach you the way they used to. The old tactics don't work. The guilt trips, the gaslighting, the selective silence, all of it used to knock you off balance. Now, you don't even flinch. You move different, and they're still trying to deal with the fact that you didn't send a warning. Because growth doesn't ask for permission. It happens when you realize survival is no longer enough. You were built for more, and they were counting on you never realizing that. Now that you've stepped into your next level, they're stuck on pause, trying to figure out how to interact with a version of you that no longer plays small. And deep down they know you're not coming back. It's not bitterness. It's boundaries. You didn't cut them off. You just rose to a height where their old energy can't reach. And for people who were only loyal to your lowest self, that feels like abandonment. But in reality, it's freedom for you and a loud, silent consequence for them. Number 3, their ego wrote you off. Now their soul feels the absence. They brushed you off like you were nothing, laughed at your intensity, mocked how deeply you felt things, said you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. They labeled your passion as a weakness, your empathy as a liability. And now, in the most ironic twist of all, they feel the void of your absence like a pressure they can't explain. Not because they miss you as a person, but because they miss the effect you had on their life. You weren't just someone who cared, you were someone who saw. You gave people the kind of attention that made them feel real. You listened when no one else did. You noticed things, felt energy shifts, picked up on the emotions others couldn't name. You were a quiet stabilizer, an unspoken comfort. And while they never admitted it out loud, they fed off that. They leaned on it. They were tethered to it. Now that you've moved on and elevated, that emotional foundation you gave them is gone. And they feel it, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a silent unraveling. They can't put their finger on it. But something in their world feels off. That's because your presence used to bring a balance they never appreciated. You were the calm in their chaos, the depth in their surface-level life, the soul in a space where everyone else was wearing masks. They thought you'd always be there. They thought you needed them, but you healed. You grew. You recognized that being the emotional backbone in relationships where your value went unnoticed was not your destiny. And now they're realizing the weight you carried, the same weight they took for granted. They didn't lose a follower, they lost a force. Their ego wrote you off, but their soul knows what it lost. That's the part they don't talk about. That's the discomfort they carry. Because once someone's truly seen and held by you, anything less than that feels hollow. And now that hollowness follows them everywhere. Number 4, you broke the unspoken contract to stay small. You were never asked directly to play small, but the message was clear. Keep quiet. Don't stand out too much. Be humble, but not too confident. Be smart, but don't outshine. Be present, but not powerful. That's the unspoken contract they tried to lock you into. You were allowed to exist, but only if your existence didn't challenge theirs. You were accepted as long as your growth didn't stretch past their comfort zone, but you broke it. Silently. Boldly. Without apology. You stopped filtering your power to keep insecure people comfortable. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit into rooms that were never built for your expansion. The moment you stopped second-guessing your worth, the contract dissolved, and so did the illusion that they were somehow above you. Because it was never about you being too much. It was about them needing you to be less so they could feel more. Your glow exposes what they tried to keep hidden. Your success threatens the stories they told themselves to justify their stagnation. You being fully yourself forces them to confront the fact that they settled, that they played it safe, that they chose average while you kept pushing toward more, even when no one clapped for you. And now that you're shining without their approval, it disrupts their entire belief system. They were banking on you staying in your box. They never thought you'd realize that the ceiling wasn't real. They never expected you to walk away from their validation like it wasn't your oxygen, but you did. Now your presence alone creates discomfort, not because you're doing too much, but because you're finally doing you, loudly, unapologetically, and they can't unsee it, they can't unfeel the shift. Your light isn't just shining, it's burning down every excuse they made for why they never grew. And they're standing in the ashes, pretending it's smoke in their eyes when it's really envy in their chest. Number 5, you're a mirror. They can no longer smudge. They used to twist the narrative, spin things around, and make you question your own reality. When they felt small, they made you feel responsible. When they felt insecure, they called you arrogant. When they felt inadequate, they made your confidence look like a problem. It wasn't truth, it was projection. You were their emotional dumping ground. Their mirror with fingerprints all over it, smeared with their own unhealed mess. But that version of you is gone. You've become too clear, too aware, too grounded. The confusion they once relied on no longer works because you no longer absorb what isn't yours. You've done the inner work. You've sharpened your discernment. You now know the difference between what's being done to you and what's being thrown at you to avoid accountability. And now, without all the smudges, you reflect back something they can't stand: truth. You reflect the work they haven't done, the potential they've ignored, the growth they avoided because comfort was easier. Your clarity exposes their chaos. Your peace highlights their restlessness. Your evolution puts pressure on their stagnation. And here's the part that really stings. They can't twist it anymore. They can't manipulate it, downplay it, or spin it into something convenient. You're too rooted to be rattled, and that threatens the entire illusion they built around you. They look at you now and see themselves unfiltered. That's the power of a mirror that no longer bends to ego. Your presence alone has become confronting. Not because you're judging them, but because you're not dimming anymore. And without the smudge, they have no choice but to see the cracks in their own reflection. It's not your job to blur your brilliance so others feel better in their denial. You've stepped into a season where your very being speaks truth. And for those still hiding from theirs, that's not just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. Number 6, they're not watching you, they're studying you. They used to talk about you like you were a joke, a warning, a wild card. You were the subject of group chats, side eyes, and whispered conversations. They mocked your ambition, rolled their eyes at your consistency, and treated your vision like it was nothing but fantasy. But now, they're watching with a different kind of energy, quiet, careful, and calculated. They're not just watching anymore, they're studying. Your name doesn't come up in gossip the way it used to, because now you've become reference material. They're checking your moves, tracing your patterns, dissecting your content, your language, your style. They're taking notes in silence, trying to copy the steps without walking the path, and they'll never admit it. They'd rather bite their tongues than say, "I'm learning from someone I once laughed at." But that's exactly what's happening. You became the blueprint without asking for the title. You didn't hand out a manual, but your journey speaks louder than anything they've ever tried to fake. The irony is they thought your grind was just noise. Now they realize it was foundation building. They're trying to replicate the results without enduring the pressure. They want the glow, but not the grind. They want the power, but not the process. They see the shine, but not the sleepless nights, the private breakdowns, the internal wars you had to win just to keep showing up. That's where they keep failing, because what they're copying is just the outcome. But the reason you shine the way you do is because your success was paid for in full, through sacrifice, integrity, and resilience. That's the part they'll never be able to duplicate. So let them study, let them screenshot, mimic, and rehearse. Because the truth is, your journey can be watched, but it can't be faked. You weren't built in public. You were forged in silence. And no imitation can ever carry the same weight as something that was earned. Number 7. They laughed at your process but are haunted by your results. They thought it was funny, your focus, your late nights, your talk about vision and purpose. You became the punchline to people who couldn't see past their next weekend. They joked about how serious you were, how you kept to yourself, how you were always doing too much for something they were sure would never materialize. Your goals sounded like fairy tales to them. The fact that you believed in yourself made them uncomfortable, so they mocked it. That was easier than admitting they had none of that belief for themselves. They couldn't understand why you didn't crave the same attention, the same distractions, the same surface-level validation. You were off the radar, working, stretching, transforming, and they laughed at that. To them, discipline looked like desperation. Isolation looked like failure. Your dreams looked like a fantasy they'd never invest in because they didn't think anyone could pull it off, especially not you. Now look at the shift. They scroll through your wins in silence, eyes wide, mouth shut, spirit agitated, because you weren't just consistent, you were right, and that truth haunts them. You were everything they said you weren't, driven, focused, tapped in, and destined, and now they can't unsee it. You're living the reality they swore was impossible, and every time they see your face, your work, your presence, something inside them gets triggered, not because you've wronged them, but because your success exposes the lie they told themselves, that hard work, vision, and self-trust wouldn't amount to anything. They used to laugh because they thought they were ahead. Now, they're stuck replaying the memory of what they once dismissed, because your life is now walking proof that discipline was never delusion, and silence was never weakness. They thought your process was a joke, but your results, they turned out to be the punchline, and they're the only ones not laughing. Number 8, your progress is their proof that time didn't heal them, it just exposed them. They told themselves time would fix it, that if they ignored the discomfort long enough, it would disappear. That bitterness would dissolve on its own, that avoiding growth was the same as healing. So they coasted, numbing, distracting, repeating the same cycles in nicer clothes or under new excuses. But time didn't heal them. It just gave them space to stay stuck. And now your progress is making that fact impossible to ignore. You used time differently. You didn't run from yourself, you sat with your mess. You faced the parts of you that were hard to look at. You cried, you questioned, you cracked open, but you did the work. And because of that, you evolved, not just outwardly, but at the core. You didn't just change habits, you changed identity. That kind of growth isn't cosmetic. It's internal, it's undeniable. And now when they look at you, they're not just seeing who you've become, they're seeing who they could have been. Your glow makes them uncomfortable, not because you're ahead, but because you're proof that healing requires confrontation. You didn't blame time, you used it, you planted in it, you bled in it, you made it your training ground. Meanwhile, they used it as a hiding place, a delay button on accountability, and now the contrast is loud. They're not jealous of your wins, they're haunted by the reminder that you grew while they stood still. That time didn't betray them, they betrayed themselves by hoping it would do for them what only courage and self-awareness could. Your transformation is the evidence, the mirror, the call-out they never expected to see walking around in human form. You didn't just outgrow them, you exposed the fact that they never started. And deep down they know it. That's why they keep their distance. That's why their energy feels off. Because every new level you step into reveals just how long they've been standing in place, hoping time would do the work you were brave enough to do yourself. Number 9, they didn't think you'd survive without them. They truly believed you needed them, not just emotionally, but for validation, access, status. Whatever illusion of power they had built in their heads. They thought they were your backbone, your lifeline, the glue holding your potential together. So when you pulled away, when you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped showing up with open hands and soft eyes, they waited for the fallout. They thought you'd break, they thought you'd crawl back, but you didn't. You flourished. Your independence didn't just survive, it thrived. You didn't fall apart without them. You found parts of yourself you didn't even know were missing. You grew louder in your truth, firmer in your boundaries, bolder in your decisions, and the wildest part, everything they claimed you couldn't do without them. You've now done better on your own. The glow they swore would dim without their presence, it's self-sustaining now. You're radiating, not from revenge, but from regeneration, and they're rattled, not because you hate them, but because you don't need them. You've become untouchable, not in ego, but in energy. The access they once had is closed, not by rage, but by revelation. You see them clearly now, and that alone rewrote the terms. They're left spinning, trying to figure out how the person they underestimated turned into the version of themselves they never imagined possible. It's not that you became someone else. It's that you finally stopped being less than you were just to keep certain people close. Now they're irrelevant, not because you erased them, but because they were never required for your evolution in the first place. They were a chapter, not the cover. That's the part they can't swallow. You were the source the whole time. And now that you've tapped in, they can't tag along, can't rewrite the story, can't reinsert themselves. They miscalculated your strength. They bet on your dependency. And now your very existence proves they were never the power. They were just the distraction. Number 10. Your evolution turned their manipulation into a monument of failure. They thought they had you figured out. They played the long game. Slow manipulation wrapped in fake concern, half-truths disguised as love, control masked as guidance. They tested your boundaries under the label of loyalty, twisted your reactions into reasons to doubt yourself, and made you feel like the problem every time you stood up for your own peace. It wasn't always loud, but it was deliberate, and for a while it worked. They crafted a version of you that was easier to manage, smaller, quieter, confused. They didn't want the real you, they wanted the version that second-guessed their tone, apologized too quickly, over-explained and shrank when they got distant. It wasn't love, it was control, emotional strategy, mental sleight of hand. And they thought they'd built something solid out of it. They thought they'd conditioned you just right, until you evolved, and not just a little. You grew so far beyond the version of you they could manipulate that the entire structure of their control collapsed. Suddenly the guilt didn't land. The silence didn't shake you. The pressure didn't make you fold. And what once looked like loyalty now looked like self-abandonment, and you walked away from it, clean, clear, and no longer confused. That's when their whole narrative crumbled. Everything they tried to construct, the emotional traps, the twisted power dynamics, the distorted perception of you became useless. Your evolution turned their manipulation into a monument of failure, proof that their strategies were never sustainable, only effective while you were asleep to your own worth. But now you're awake, aligned, unreachable in the ways that once made you easy to bend. And the worst part for them? They're stuck in a chapter that doesn't even exist in your story anymore. Still rereading old scripts, still trying to press buttons you've removed, still believing they have access to a version of you that's been long gone. Your upgrade didn't just free you, it exposed them. And now they're left holding the blueprints to a trap that no longer works, on someone who no longer fits inside it. Number 11. You became too expensive for their energy budget. They were comfortable when you were accessible, emotionally generous, and endlessly forgiving. As long as your empathy outpaced your standards, they had a place in your life. You were the one they called when things fell apart, the one they leaned on when their own world got heavy, but they never matched your energy. They took withdrawals, never made deposits, and assumed you'd always stay affordable, cheap in access, rich in compassion. But something shifted. You stopped operating on emotional credit. You started checking the price of peace. You began asking the real questions. What is this connection costing me? How much am I spending to keep this alive? And the moment you got serious about protecting your energy, the balance changed. You no longer gave out unlimited grace. You no longer accepted emotional crumbs. You pulled the plug on one-sided transactions, and suddenly your presence came with a price, a standard. And they couldn't pay it. Not because you're greedy, but because they're bankrupt. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They never invested in healing, never deposited honesty, effort, or respect. So now that you're no longer cheap to access, they feel shut out. Not because you're cold, but because they never upgraded. You're vibrating higher, operating with more clarity, more integrity, more discernment. And that frequency, it's expensive. It costs maturity, it costs self-awareness, it costs accountability. They want the old you, the one who accepted excuses, overlooked patterns, gave unlimited chances. But that version of you no longer exists. You've evolved into someone who values energy like currency, and you're no longer offering VIP access to people who never even paid admission. Now they're stuck on the outside, looking in, trying to reconnect with a version of you they never truly appreciated. You didn't become cold, you became clear. You didn't switch up, you leveled up. And now, to be in your space requires more than proximity, it requires alignment, and they're overdrafted. They had a grace period and they spent it carelessly. Now they're broke in all the ways that matter, and you're no longer for sale. Number 12, you didn't just change, you recoded the blueprint. You didn't just grow, you shattered the mold. You didn't rise within their rules, timelines, or expectations. You didn't follow the traditional path of success they could measure, predict, or box in. Instead, you rewrote the entire script. You chose your own rhythm. You tore up the outdated blueprint they tried to hand you, the one that demanded obedience, silence, and playing small. And you authored something entirely new, something they can't decode. And that's what's shaking them to their core. They were ready to deal with your progress as long as it stayed familiar, as long as it looked like what they expected, predictable, digestible, easy to label, but you evolved in a way they couldn't track. You stopped asking for permission, stopped playing by the rules they needed you to follow to feel superior or relevant. You didn't just step out of the box, you dismantled it, set it on fire, and turned the ashes into fuel. Now your presence alone feels disruptive, not because you're loud, but because you're real, rooted, self-led. You're not echoing anyone's voice but your own. And that kind of freedom, it terrifies people still dependent on outside validation to know who they are. You don't just challenge their understanding of you, you challenge their understanding of themselves. Your energy doesn't fit their framework, so they read it as arrogance. They mislabel your clarity as rebellion. But the truth is, they've never encountered self-authored power before. You didn't improve inside the system. They're feeling the aftershocks because you broke it. The roles you were expected to play, caretaker, backup plan, underdog, they're obsolete now. Your transformation wasn't cosmetic, it was structural, foundational, and it sent a signal out into the world that says, I am the source now. They feel disoriented because the rules changed and they didn't get the memo. But that's not your concern anymore. You didn't come here to conform. You came here to recode, and you're doing exactly that. Exactly. Number 13, they feel the disconnection as disruption because you were their hidden source. They didn't realize how much they depended on you, not until your energy was no longer on tap. You weren't loud about your presence, but it carried weight. You didn't force your worth, but it quietly held everything together. You weren't just in their life, you were holding their life in place in ways even they couldn't articulate. You were the grounding force beneath their chaos, the calm under their mess, the sense of meaning behind their noise. But they never thanked you. They mistook your emotional labor for personality. They mistook your steadiness for simplicity. They thought the way you showed up for them was just how you were wired, not realizing it was a choice, a costly one. You were the one they vented to, leaned on, pulled from. You carried their weight without complaint, made room for their storms while managing your own. You gave what you never received. You offered stability they couldn't even name, much less reciprocate. And now that you're gone, something feels broken, but they can't quite name it. All they know is things feel heavier, their mind is louder, their connections are shallower. And life feels harder in a way that doesn't make sense until they trace the pattern and realize it leads back to you. You weren't just someone they knew. You were the hidden infrastructure behind their emotional survival, the battery they were draining but never recharging. And your absence, it's not silence, it's collapse. You didn't walk away with noise or revenge. You just pulled your energy back to where it belonged, with you. And that one act of restoration turned their whole system upside down. They're not mad because you're gone. They're crumbling because the power source they never credited is no longer powering them. Now they feel what you felt, unsupported, unseen, imbalanced. But there's no version of you coming back to fix it. That chapter is closed. And for the first time, they're having to stand on their own feet without leaning on the one person who never let them fall until now. Number 14, you became the proof that loyal to their limitations was never your destiny. They thought you'd always stay at their level, that your shared pain, your late-night venting sessions, your mutual struggles were a permanent bond. You were both hurting, both confused, both navigating wounds that never seemed to fully close. And in that space, they got comfortable. Not because they wanted to stay broken, but because the brokenness gave them a familiar identity, one they didn't want to outgrow, but you did. You reached a point where survival wasn't enough. You didn't want to just cope anymore. You wanted to heal, and healing required separation. It meant leaving the comfort of misery, walking away from trauma loops that felt like home, and outgrowing dynamics that were built on shared dysfunction. That decision didn't come easy. You didn't leave anyone behind out of pride or ego. You just realized, this can't be the end of my story. And that's where the fracture happened, because when you rose, they didn't clap, they panicked. Your transformation felt like betrayal. Not because you hurt them, but because you exposed them. You showed what was possible. You became proof that healing is a choice, that peace is real, that the cycle can be broken. And for someone still hiding behind emotional walls, still loyal to their limitations, that's threatening. They called you fake, said you changed, labeled you selfish. But the truth is, they're grieving the version of you that kept them comfortable, the version that stayed stuck, small, and second-guessing, the version that needed them as much as they needed you. But that version, you buried it. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival. You didn't leave them behind. You left behind the behaviors, beliefs, and stories that were keeping you behind. And if that makes your joy feel like betrayal, or your growth feel like abandonment, it says more about their commitment to stagnation than it ever will about your character. You weren't disloyal. You were destined. And you finally chose the path that honored that truth, even if it meant walking alone. Your journey is more than just a story of growth. It's a declaration of sovereignty. Every step you've taken, every boundary you've drawn, and every truth you've spoken has reshaped not only your life, but the very environment that once tried to contain you. The people who couldn't keep up, who underestimated your power, who tried to dim your light, they're feeling the aftershocks because you didn't just evolve, you transformed the rules of the game. Your presence no longer fits into their scripts, their expectations, or their comfort zones. And that disruption is exactly the proof that you've become unstoppable. You broke free from the invisible contracts that demanded you stay small. You refused to be the emotional crutch for those unwilling to carry their own weight. Instead, you claimed your energy back with fierce intention and unshakable clarity. In doing so, you revealed who was truly loyal, to you or to their own fears. You rewrote the blueprint of your existence, moving beyond survival into self-authored power. You became a living testament that healing is a choice, growth is non-negotiable, and peace is a right, not a privilege granted by others. The impact you've made isn't always loud or visible, but it's seismic. It shakes foundations and exposes illusions. It forces those around you to confront their own stagnation or step aside. Your glow isn't just a reflection of your success, it's a mirror that reveals what others have refused to see within themselves. And while some may feel abandoned or betrayed, the reality is that you chose freedom over familiarity, courage over comfort, and truth over illusion. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new era where you operate unapologetically in your power. You no longer need validation from those who never believed in your potential. You no longer carry the weight of others' limitations. Instead, you lead with an energy so potent that it commands respect without demanding it. So keep rising, keep evolving, keep breaking every barrier that tries to define or confine you, because what you are building is not just a life, it's a legacy. And the world is already feeling the full effects of you being on the next level. If this message resonated with you, if you feel that fire inside, that call to rise above and redefine your story, then don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join a community committed to growth, truth, and unstoppable transformation. Like this video to let us know you're here, ready to claim your power. Drop a comment below, share your journey, your breakthroughs, or even the challenges you're facing. Your story might be the spark someone else needs right now. And don't forget to share this with those who need to hear it too. The ones ready to break free, level up, and feel the full effect of their own next-level energy. Together, we're building more than a channel. We're building a movement. So stay connected, stay inspired, and keep rising.